Certain NASCAR races get covered endlessly for many reasons. They had historical significance, a renowned driver got their final win, incredible battles to the checkered flag. Races like the 1979 Daytona 500, the 2000 Winston 500, and the 2003 Carolina Dodge Dealers 400 are covered so extensively because they are interesting. Things about them all combine to make for an incredible story that lasts for generations. Races like these deserve the recognition they get. But you only see these types of races once every blue moon, and are usually focused around the NASCAR Cup Series mainly. In modern day NASCAR, you have 36 races in a Cup Series schedule, and similar numbers for the Xfinity and Gander Truck Series seasons. They can't all be special. Hell, most NASCAR fans know certain races because it involved their favorite drivers in some way. And there's another point, emotional attachment. People remember races because their driver did something great in them, or they got wrecked out in them. Emotions run high in all sports, so it's no wonder some races are remembered off of that alone. But again, these races are usually pretty uncommon. So what about all those other races? The ones where nothing interesting happened? The ones with no historical significance in the greater outlook? The ones with no emotions attached to them by just about everyone alive and dead? What makes these races so unappealing, so insignificant, so boring? So, as a break from the usual niche humor you find on this channel, we will be exploring a race that is all of what I described. A race that no one remembers, where nothing incredible or important happened, and no one remembers with strong emotion. This is a race that you for sure have never heard about, or at the least remember anything from it. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the 1998 NAPACARD 200. The date is May 9th, 1998 in Monroe, Washington State. The NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series comes to Evergreen Speedway to run the 5th race of the 27-race season, the 1998 NAPACARD 200. It's definitely not a delightful spring day in Washington, as rains came in through the morning and soaked the track. The race would be delayed for about 30 minutes from the original start time to dry off the track and get it to raceable condition. The broadcast for today's race is hosted by Superstation TBS with Ken Squire and Larry McReynolds on the call, two very iconic broadcasters nowadays. Though at this time, Larry Mack was still a crew chief for Dale Earnhardt, who won the Daytona 500 earlier that year. 32 Craftsman trucks took to the grid for today's race, with Joe Ruttman in the 99 taking pole position over Jay Sauter in the 3 truck. Heading into the race weekend, Jack Sprague in the number 24 leads the point standings with an 8-point advantage over number 16 of Ron Hornaday. Sprague runs a special scheme this time around instead of the usual green Quaker State truck, with 1-800 Marrow 2 on the quarter panels and rear bumper. This is a bone marrow awareness hotline that was promoted after Rick Hendrick, the owner of Sprague's 24 truck, was diagnosed with leukemia in late 1996. Sprague starts in the 3rd row beside Hornaday in 6th place, so it should be an even match throughout the day. After the rain had stopped and the track looked dry enough, the trucks were fired up for the warm-up laps. Stacey Compton, who you may know as the guy who ran the 92 in 2001 in the Cup Series, was asked by officials to go ahead of the pacing field to do some laps to see if the track is any good for racing. Meanwhile, Tony Roper in the number 31 truck had radio issues on pace laps to where he couldn't hear his spotter or crew chief. He takes the safe route and pits for repairs to the system, giving up his 12th starting spot due to it. Compton completes a couple of laps and radios in that the track is good to go, and he takes his spot in 4th spot outside of Greg Biffle in the 50 truck. With all that taken care of and a few pace laps under the green and yellow flags, the 1998 NAPACARD 200 goes full green at the completion of lap 3. Joe Ruttman gets the good start and leads the field for the beginning part. The start is like you would expect from the truck series at a short track. Door banging, bumper to bumper, attempts to pass for position. Concerns were raised about Ron Hornaday, who slipped to the tail end of the top 10 in the early going, wondering if he had a problem on the truck. But as it turns out, it was just Hornaday conserving his tires for the early going. Back in the early days of the truck series, tire changes were not permitted unless the case of a flat, even at the halfway mark. So drivers had to manage their tires as much as they could during the whole 200 laps. It also didn't help that the rain washed off the rubber laid down on the track in practice and qualifying, which made handling a bit tricky on the especially cold tires on the start of the race. The first real caution came at lap 19, when the 84 of Wayne Anderson made contact with Andy Houston in the 60 truck on the backstretch. Houston slid down into the right front of Chuck Bowden in the number 57, and then was turned backwards by the 42 of Rick McRae. Due to the aforementioned rains, both Houston and McRae's trucks got stuck in the grass in turn 3. During this yellow, Chuck Bowden, Houston, and McRae went into the pits for repairs, with Bowden needing a new right front tire after the other one was sheared by the spinning Andy Houston. Bizarrely, the 88 of Terry Cook went into the pits as well to inspect the rear axles, believing to have broken one due to poor rear grip performance. It was never indicated if it was the case, but I'm willing to suspect it wasn't, considering that he was able to go back out and complete the race. The race goes back to green at lap 26 with Joe Ruttman out in front as he had been before. Sprague at this point began to claw his way up towards the front of the field as the grip started to pick up on the track. To no one's surprise at all, Jack Sprague took the top spot from Ruttman at lap 38. Racing from that point again was like normal short track racing, with only minor incidents happening like Wayne Anderson in the 84 getting loose in the middle 1 and 2 and brushing the wall slightly. But the caution comes out at lap 66 for some fluid in turn 3, and the field slows to a crawl. Greg Biffle, who started in the third spot for this race, pits under caution to adjust the track bar due to bad handling in the left rear. The problem was unknown, so they sent Biffle back out and was sorted out in the halftime break. Shortly after this, the race resumed at lap 72. Troubles would strike late in the first half for Doug George in the number 26, whose engine let go on him. He hadn't been much of a factor all day, running tail end of the top 30 for most of the stint, but it was still a letdown for George's team nonetheless. Meanwhile, Hornaday made a good charge through the field in the latter half of the first 100 laps, making his way up to third. But before the halftime break officially began, caution came out on lap 97 for a spin from Dominic Dobson in the 78, after contact with what seems to be the number 43 of Jimmy Hensley in turn 2. With this wreck, halfway had been reached. So here's a quick rundown of the changes to the top trucks in the field. Mike Wallace in the number 52 was unsung in the early parts, but started to peak his truck towards the front by the end of the first half. Wallace, and a lot of other drivers, reported a tightness in the corners. Wallace's crew did a spring rubber adjustment to try and alleviate these issues. Hornaday came in with the same tightness issues, and his team decided to change out the front sway bar to help with more corner entry turn-in. Joe Ruttman, the pole sitter, changed out a whole rear spring to add some grip to the back of the truck. And Sprague, who was clearly the dominant truck out there so far, decided not to change anything on the truck due to bad luck before with changing things not going as planned. So at the end of halftime, the field would line up like this. Sprague out in front of Mike Wallace, followed by Hornaday in third place, Ron Barfield in the number 35 truck in the fourth place, and Joe Ruttman rounding out the top 5. The race restarts on lap 102, the start of the final half of the race, but it wouldn't be green for long before a wreck in turn 3 involving future Truck Series champion Mike Bliss in the number 2 and future NASCAR Cup champion Kevin Harvick in the quite iconic Blue Spirits truck in the 75. Both trucks made contact on the backstretch and slammed into the turn 3 wall hard, eventually causing an oil fire underneath Harvick's wrecked vehicle. Harvick was not very pleased with Bliss after the wreck.
Well, Kevin Harvick has just almost finished his long walk back. Kevin, you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's too bad. Made a couple adjustments. Truck seemed pretty good. I guess Bliss didn't want to race very good. But, you know, that's short track racing. We'll come back next week.
I think that the great thing about this race is that the footage on YouTube is a raw feed from the satellite, which means that you get to hear some interesting stuff by the commentators in the commercial breaks.
You're not eating your bananas, Keen.
Oh, my heart, thank you for reminding me.
Gracious sakes, I don't know what to do without you. They're rotten enough there.
Well, they're ripening. They're not rotten, they're just ripening. Would you like one of the bananas?
No, thank you.
You could have one. I mean, you've been such a help. Certainly, they're deserving.
At the restart on lap 114, Ron Barfield in the number 35 had transmission issues getting up to speed. He luckily still had fourth gear, but it made him drop like a rock from the top 10 to the last truck on the lead lap at the time. After that though, the race ran green to the finish. Things did pick up at the end of the race, however, when Sprague was being hunted down by his closest points rival, Ron Hornaday. However, the lap traffic held true, and Jack Sprague got his first win of 1998, and his first ever win at Evergreen Speedway. Oddly enough, the number 66 of Brian Refner spun across the line on the final lap in a battle with Mike Wallace, but was still able to manage an 8th place at the line. Sprague led the rest of the race after his pass on Ruttman earlier that day. Randy Tolsma in the number 61 was able to capture his second straight top 5 of the 1998 season with a 3rd place. Despite being the pole sitter, Ruttman sadly fell out of the top 10 in the later half, and wound up with a 12th place finish. Ron Barfield's day wasn't completely doom and gloom, it seems, as he picked up a top 10 as the first truck a lap down in the 9th spot. Sprague's win and Hornaday's 2nd place allowed for the 24 team to extend their points lead by 10 points over Hornaday's. So, there you have it, the 1998 NAPACARD 200. A race that I only discovered because my friend suggested to me to use a randomizer to find a full race to watch on YouTube. A race that you almost certainly never heard of before this video, and yet, despite it being a very insignificant, typical truck race, I found a lot of enjoyment in finding all the things that I did. Saying something is uninteresting or boring actually gives it a lot more merit than you might think. Nothing in the world is normal, it's really what you make of it that makes it normal. And the fact that I could cram all this info into a video about a race practically no one knows or cares about is quite remarkable. Maybe these sorts of races aren't boring after all, or uninteresting. Sometimes you really have to dig, but I think that this race and the analysis that I was able to construct proves that anything can be interesting if you look a bit closer. Now, I have no idea if this is something I want to do for a bunch of races, because the charm could wear off pretty easily. Plus, it's quite time consuming even for a short track race in the truck series. If anything, I hope that you enjoyed this summary of a race that no one asked for, and if you did, let me know what you think about it and the main topic of the video in question. And I'll be back to making some dumb short clips of niche NASCAR references for your all's entertainment in no time. So long, everybody.